Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Liz. I am a clinical trials manager in the clinical trials office. And before that, I was a clinical research coordinator for 4.5 years. I also worked in a previous life in teaching providers at the elbow support for Epic. And I currently do our incoming staff for the CTO specifically, basic Epic training for research. So this is kind of my area at the CTO. So today we will learn multiple aspects. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Epic research module in particular, and then I'll move on to general navigation of Epic that may, and I'll give tips that maybe you didn't know on how to find things or how I go about screening and finding patients and looking at their qualifications, etc. Today will be a little different. I will not have a PowerPoint. I will do a live demonstration in the Epic Playground. So these are not real patients. And I encourage everybody to practice any of your newly acquired skills in the Epic Playground. There's a general login for everybody for training in different departments. There's general login for Epic. I can actually write it in the chat after this, but it's RSHCD, and then the password is just training. So I'll go over dashboards for research, and that'll be the coordinator dashboard in the research learning home and what you can find in those. I'll go over study maintenance tabs and research study tabs. I'll show you how to associate an encounter to the patient, what documentation you need within those encounters, how to place orders and associate them within an encounter into the patient for research in particular, and how to do it when you are doing only the orders or when the patient is already in clinic. I'll show you how to send AEs within Epic to your PI so they can give you relatedness and grading, how to release patients to study monitors, and then I'll end with my regular overview of Epic for research. So I'm going to log into the playground, which is right here. And this is via Citrix. It's starting. It's just taking its time, of course. I've logged in 500 times today and it always goes fast, but now it has to go slow because
I switched up the camera view because I feel like if you saw your face very large the whole time, it might be distracting.
thank you. I appreciate that.
So this is being recorded, so it's just getting the whole room. But
and I am
quality's
gonna
great.
stop sharing and reshare because I switch screens, right? So here we go. So this is the playground. Again, these are not real patients. So login for Epic Playground for research is RSH CD. And then the password is just training. And here you can change the department where it logs you into. This just logs you into an internal medicine clinic. You can always change this either upon login or later on.
That's good.
Yeah. Diana, you had a question? Did anybody have a question? All right, I'll keep going. And the playground resets every day so that patients that you have, let's say you have done an order on, those orders go away. I think past midnight. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you here, and I want to make this here. Okay, So the first thing I'm going to show you is this. When you log in to your Epic, if you have the Epic Research module, this is a dashboard that you should be seeing. For some people, what I've seen though is that this is completely empty and there's nothing here. The way to find this is you'll go to the drop down that appears here, or sometimes it's a link.
I have a quick question in the chat. There's a Versity coordinator who's asking, are there differences in what Epic functions Versity coordinators are allowed to use versus MCW coordinators?
Do you know if the Versity coordinators have Epic Research module? That would be my first question. If you do not have the Epic Research module, it may look a little different. You may not be able to order things. But I am not really familiar with the view that you guys get. I feel like for all coordinators, however, if you're doing clinical research, you should have the Epic Research module. It should be the same. You can contact me and I can follow up on that to see if you have the correct module. Essentially, if you have this button that says Research Studies and Study Maintenance, you have the correct module, which is Epic Research module. All right, so going back to the dashboards. This is where you search for them. In this case, because this is made for training, they're already here for you. And this has been favorited and starred, which means that's the one that's going to show. But I am going to click on this one, the Research Learning Home, and I want to show you why that's important. Here you'll find tip sheets, you will find recordings of sessions. It'll teach you how to do different things that I'm going to talk about today. So here, for example, it's showing you all the resources that you can use for creating reports within Epic. And I'll show you why those are important in a little bit. Here's a recording of specifics on the Epic Research module. You can click that and it'll take you to those recordings. Because I'm not only going to talk about these today, I'm also going to give you general tips. You may want to go and revisit those. So you can always do that through the Research Learning Home. And anytime there's a new release of any dashboards or how to do things. So for example, here's a tip on how to change study monitor selection, anything research related. That you should know about regarding Epic will show up in this Research Learning Home. I'm going to go back to our Research Coordinator dashboard. And they go really in depth through all of these. I will show you the most important parts of these. They go in depth in these in that recording that I pointed out to all of you. So we will start with what to do in the study maintenance. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to search here. You will search for your study. The one that we're using today for this is the insomnia study, and it happens to be right here. I'm going to accept that. And this is all the information that's filled in here gets pushed from Encore into Epic automatically. So all the information that you input when you request that your Encore protocol be set up will be pushed to here. The problem is we have studies in which we don't use Encore. So then you'll have to fill out all this information by hand. And it is important to have that filled out and to create the study within Epic so that you can associate patients, so that you can associate encounters, and so that the billing goes to the correct place. We've had problems where, for example, a search encounter in an order wasn't linked correctly to Epic. The patient ended up being charged like $8,000. We were able to work very hard and reverse it, but you want to avoid having to do that. That also creates somewhat of a distrust from patients who you've told you're not going to be charged for any of these research procedures, and then they end up getting a bill to their health insurance and for some people to themselves personally. So again, most of this will be filled out. You want to put in here the users. So PI, again, usually will be populated from Encore. If not, you'll have to fill all this information out by hand. And then you want to put in who the coordinators are. This is just a standard coordinator that they're using for this module, but you would find the name of the people who are involved in this. If nurses are going to be working in the study, this usually applies more to the cancer center because they put in orders with readback for co-signing. You want to add those people here too. I think one of the things that I find most important, and you can keep scrolling down and find it, or you can go here on the side and find that, is going to automated actions. Why? Automated actions lets you select to be notified for specific things. For example, the example that they have here is a procedure result. Who do you want it to be routed to? It says here to the coordinators. So every time there's a new procedure result entered in the patient's chart, you will receive an automated notification within your in-basket. And I'll talk to you about in-basket in a little bit. So hold on there. You can go to this little loop here, and you can see all the stuff that you can choose to be notified about. One of them that I find really useful is ADT event. ADT stands for admission, discharge, and transfer events. That means that whenever the patient who is associated with the study gets admitted to Freighter or Freighter-related clinics within Epic, you will receive a notification. Anytime a patient is discharged, you will receive a notification, and anytime a patient is transferred to a Freighter system, you will receive a notification. Why is that important? Because as coordinators, we have to report adverse events. If a patient is being admitted, it is likely that they're having an adverse event. Not all the time. Sometimes they may just be getting a routine procedure like a colonoscopy. I work in GI, so colonoscopies are relevant to me. Or they may be getting, stitches because they fell down the stairs. But the fact that they fell down the stairs, if they end up finding out that it was because they had a syncope because of the drug that they're being given, then that's an adverse event that's reportable. That's a serious adverse event. So I find that very, very useful. So the way you select that is you go ADT event, and then you can look here, the people that you can select. In this case, we have coordinators and PI is what you can put in there. And I think it's the same for the real Epic, that it is coordinators and PI. The place where you will find those notifications is your in-basket. You can access your in-basket from here, this button right here. From here, you can see that it's Research ADT event, or right here. So I'm gonna go through the in-basket. So this is exactly what it appears on mine, and I'm clicking on that. Looks like these are not populating, but it's letting me know this research participant, the way I see it on my real Epic is it'll say patient admission to the ED. And if it's an admission to the ED or to an inpatient floor, I'm gonna look at it and see if there's usually an adverse event to report. And then I will show you in a little bit how to report those adverse events within Epic, and how to send it to your PI, because like we know, ultimately the PIs are responsible for determining the relatedness and the grading for all adverse events, whether they are immediately reportable or not. But this is where you'll find those notifications. And in order for that to happen, remember that you have to go to study maintenance, go to automated actions, and add yourself. In this case, it will say study coordinators. In that case, you have to make sure that you are listed as a coordinator. So users and providers, you have to make sure that you're listed as a coordinator within the users and providers so that you can get notified. If you haven't been added, you can always add yourself. If you haven't been added, you can always ask somebody to add you. if you can't find how to do it. But if you go to automated actions and select that coordinators and PI are notified, but you are not listed within those people here, you will not be notified. So make sure that that's done. Again, very important part of that. Another thing is most patients will be automatically, I'm not going to save these changes. Usually you will save them if you want them to remain. This is an example of a clinic schedule. So most patients will be automatically associated from Encore. If you're using Encore, especially if your study's interventional, you're already using it. But again, studies that are not in Encore, patients will not be automatically associated to your research study. So after you consent that patient, how do you tell the system this patient is part of my study? You do that through this tab, which is research studies. Gonna ask you to look for that patient. We have a test patient right here. It's one of the research patients that I've used recently, but you can always search for their name, MRN. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. You can search by their social security number. In this case, I'm gonna use Leopold. I'm gonna accept that. And you can see that it opens the patient's chart. And it says here, there are no study associations to show in here. So now we're gonna add this insomnia study because we're gonna assume this patient is not an Encore. So when I go to add, it shows me a list. I can also search for it. And even though I mistyped, it showed me the correct study. And then the status, it'll give you a list of what you want to record as. Multiple things to say here. Sometimes you may list the patient as identified or interested, which are here. Why is that important? Because then that patient can be contacted by the next coordinator. Let's say you call them, they said they're interested, and you told your coworker, hey, this patient is interested. Can you please give them a call? Or somebody else is doing the screening. And you've listed the patient as declined or interested. And the other person doing the screening can go into this patient's chart and see, oh, this patient declined. We shouldn't contact them again because that would be patient harassment. Or they said, oh, this patient said they're interested. Let me give them a call to confirm that they are interested, that they understand the study, etc. You can say that the patient is on study, on treatment, off treatment. Again, these status changes automatically when you change it in Encore. You want to keep that pretty well updated as soon as this are changed within the patient. Off study is also important because you want to, or withdrawn, right? Is also important because you want to let other people know if anything happens to you that this patient has already participated and completed their study activities within this, and they don't need to be contacted again if you can't re-enroll them in this particular study. So we'll say this patient is consented. And you can enter whatever number will be your naming nomenclature here. I'm just gonna say 101. You can say their active date started today. You don't have to put in an active end date. You can enter any comments. If you have studies where a specific coordinator needs to see the patient because of X or Y reason, you can add that here.
Looks like Claire has a question. Feel free to unmute yourself. You're welcome to ask the question or drop it in the chat, either way.
Yes, hi. So, my question about like if you change it to consented, isn't that automatically routed through Encore?
It is
So
this. We're
would
assuming.
would this mess it up? Changing it like this?
So you shouldn't do it this way if your study is an Encore. You should only do it this way if your study is not an Encore and you're having to add this by hand.
Okay. Okay, because I was just like, I was told not to mess with it.
Yes, don't
If
touch
you
it.
use
If your
Encore.
study is an Encore, it's
Okay.
all coming from Encore, and you don't have to do anything here except associate encounters and associate orders. But all this status and all of that stuff will be here from when you update an Encore. For this one, we're assuming the study had to be entered by hand and the study's not an encore. And this patient, you had to add them to the study by hand. So this study is not an encore, is what we're assuming right now. So consented, we'll say, we'll leave it at that for that. And you can add any comments about them. You can see the PI here. There's a little description of what the study is. Once I accept it, you will see that it'll populate this. It says research participant. Again, this will automatically populate if the study is coming from Encore. Now I'm going to go back and view study list. And you'll see here that now these options have populated. This patient is consented, so you can see that here. You can always change this. If you have to do it manually, you can always change that. If you, by mistake, like add a patient to a study, you cannot remove them. So make sure that you're adding the correct patient. What you'll have to do is mark them as inactive within the study. All right. So you can see if the patient had been active in another trial and they were already done with said trial, you would be able to click here and say, you know, they're inactive. Like these are all the studies that they're on. You would be able to see how many studies they've pre-consented to, etc. So in this case, the patient is only in this particular study. Now, again, this is important because you want to be able to link patients to encounters. So I'm going to close out of the patient. We'll revisit this patient later.
Looks like we have another question.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Elena, you're welcome to.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So just to comment that you can delete their association to a study.
Oh, thank you for that. When I previously taught this, you could not.
You
must be.
can. There is a pathway to do it, which I'm not absolutely sure right now, but you can, because it happened to me that I associated erroneously to a study and I got them deleted. It always shows as, you know, in your right hand side box deleted.
Yep.
It will always show there that you did it, but there is a way, I can't recall exactly where you click, but there is a way to fix it and delete them from the study.
So you can't, I guess what I will say is you can't delete them through here. It may have to be done another way, but that option's not given here. But thank you for letting me know. That's good to know.
Yep.
If your study has a study calendar, by the way, the study visits will show up here, which is really nice. Okay, so I'm gonna accept this again. I'm gonna go back to the study list. And I'm gonna close out of the patient from now. So now we're going back to our dashboard, and our dashboard is super useful, especially this section with your research reports. All of the ones that you'll see here initially were already created for the research module. You can always create your own research reports. I guess that's a different talk. But one of the ways to associate, and you can create a report that is specific for your study. But let's say this patient that we just consented has their first visit coming up, and you want to link that encounter to your research study, because it's a mix. Let's say it's either solely research or it's a mixed visit where they will be doing standard of care, but also doing research. You link them the exact same way. And what this does is it tells OCRIC in billing in the background whether they need to take another look at the billing in this particular encounter to see if there are things that need to be taken out of what's billed to the patient to bill to the study itself. In order for all of this to happen, and for you to be able to associate a patient with a study, the study has to be active and the billing status has to be active as well. So now we're going to go back to research reports. So I want to see upcoming appointments for patients that are associated with my trial. you don't want to click ready to run immediately because this is created with other studies that with parameters that you can replace. You want to go to this tiny arrow here. And you want to go to edit. And I am not looking at a retinopathy study, so I am going to replace all of this. The date range, it's automatically set to look from today, and then time plus 14 means plus 14 days. So I'm going to edit all of this because I don't want to look at the retinopathy study. And I am just going to search for my insomnia trial. And I don't necessarily want people who are eligible. I want consented. And for this, we're going to choose people who are on study as well. I delete that. I'm going to switch it for my insomnia study. So I'm going to keep consented on study. And then I'm going to delete everything else. And just as a heads up, every time you have a little stop sign like this in Epic, you will not be able to move forward until you address that. And that applies for anything Epic. Enrollment status type. I'll show you all the options. You can either look at active, pre-consent, etc. I'm going to do active and pre-consent. And then these appointment types are fine. You can add or remove as you wish. I'm going to leave the date range, but you can always change that. And then in general, you can name it whatever you want. That'll make you find your study faster. So now that I've done all of that, I'm going to say this is my insomnia study report. And I'm going to keep it at that. And I'm going to run. Okay, so this found my one patient that I have in this trial. And, you know, obviously for other trials, you may have hundreds of patients. So what I'm going to do is, okay, so what you see here is that this patient has this upcoming appointment and they have already arrived, and the patient is an established patient. So I am going to link this research study, this patient to the research study. It's important to know that even if the patient's appointment is not today, the patient's appointment is in 2 weeks, you can still link it. And you want to do that linking as soon as possible, because after the visit is started and signed, you will not be able to associate the study to the patient, which means you will not be able to associate the orders to the research study. And then you're going to have to go around and have to reach out to OCRIC to let them know that you didn't associate the encounter and you didn't associate the order. So you want to do this as soon as possible, as soon as you know that the patient has an upcoming visit that will be related to research. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the patient and I'm going to use this button that says right here, link to research study. And then this is the encounter. Are you sure you want to link it? And I'm going to click this, link encounter. Now it has been linked. I'm going to close out of this. So what we did is we ran a report. We found the patient that's active in our study and that has an upcoming appointment. And we linked this appointment to the research study.
Does it save those new filters you put on it?
If you save the study, yeah, then it'll save those filters. Yes. And another thing that you can do is actually, if you go to research reports, you can go to, that's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking for. Reports. If you save that, if you favorite anything, it should show at the top, and the way to do that is you would start that. And you can also look for, when you go to reports, if you have reports open, you can also start it from here. And because you saved it now under that name, it should appear with those again. So now we have this patient linked to the encounter. And again, you want to do that as soon as possible. You can see all the parameters you can change to make it very specific to what you want to do. And now I'm going to close out of that. The patient is here. But let's imagine the patient is not here and I want to put in orders for that encounter that's coming up. Because the patient is here, I could technically open the encounter from here, which is the schedule for the day for this clinic. And the patient we're looking for is this one. So I could do it from here by double clicking and starting this research encounter and putting in orders through there. That's the easy way. But because we're imagining that this patient is coming in 2 weeks, because we're being really proactive and linking the encounter to the patient, then we can put in the orders and pen them until that occurs. So I'm gonna go here to encounter, and I'm gonna click on an orders only encounter. And I'm gonna search for that patient. Because we recently opened the patient, they're gonna be here in the recent patients. And this is them. I'm gonna accept that. And the department is the DTSHC Internal Med. And the provider, you want it to be the PI, and this person is seeing the PI. They may not be, they may be seeing a sub-I, etc. In this case, this patient is seeing the PI. And I am gonna accept that. And that opens the encounter for you to look at. Things that are required for this. The first thing you can do is look at the chart review if you need to look at, you know, when was the last time this patient was here, etc. The meds to make sure that they're not in any medications they shouldn't be on within your study. But the reason why we're opening this is we want to put in orders. Right? So you go through all of this, you scroll down. Okay, so you want to go to add an order. And for this patient, we want to do a PFT. And you're gonna type PFT, and that'll give you multiple options of what's within the system. You want to make sure you're using the correct code. So I am gonna do this. And I'm gonna select and stay so that I can continue putting in orders. And I'm gonna do a CBC. So here we go, complete blood count. If you can't find, by the way, what you're searching for, you can broaden your search and it'll bring you other orders. So now it found the CBC that I was looking for. We're gonna do this one, CBC with diff. And then now I'm gonna accept. It didn't add my CBC. I'm gonna cancel out of this. I'm gonna add the order again. Now I'm gonna accept it. It'll ask you, so again, here, anytime you have this little stop sign, you have to address things within it. So now you have to tell it how you want this to be. You want this to be ASAP, pre-clinic, routine. Let's say routine, which was already selected. Ancillary perform or external, let's say external, because let's say we don't have a department that does that here. You can make it as a standing order so they can get it whenever, or you can do it as a future order, then you'll have to specify. Let's say before next visit, within the next year. Indication, you can say this insomnia. And then you can choose the appropriate test or specifically what you want. And here, let's say spirometry. In this case, is the patient on oxygen or you need it to be done on oxygen? Let's say no. And then for formula location, it's going to give you multiple places here. Let's select Menominee Falls. Now that I've addressed all those things, the little stop sign went away. I'm going to accept this. And then I'm going to a lot of this. For different people, doing these different types of orders, will be different. So let's say there's a nurse putting in these orders, they will sign it, right? They will sign the order automatically. For most of us who are coordinators, and not clinical staff, what we will do is we will pen them, and I'll show you how to get them to the provider. So now I want to associate the order. So I want to do it's not the diagnosis. I'm getting myself. No, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm trying to associate it to the research study.
Diagnosis association.
Yeah, it's not for the, it's not on the, oh, here it is. That's what it is. Research association. Because this is for insomnia. Let's say the diagnosis would be insomnia in this case. So the place you go is options and then research association. And that's how we know it'll be associated to the research. And then do you want to associate both or just one? This is helpful so that there's a difference. Let's say this is an encounter in which you put in these orders or the provider put in the orders, and these two are associated to the encounter, but he's going to put in, or she, an order that is standard of care, not associated to the trial, then they will have another option. So I'm going to associate both because they're both associated. And then I'm going to say penned. So we click penned, and what we do is we route this to the provider through routing here. And you can go through that either through here, clicking this here, or you can just scroll down and find it. So you can also see the chart. This is actually probably easiest for everybody. And you can select send chart upon closing section. Two things that you have to do in this before you close out of it is you have to write a little note, throw a little note in here. Where, for example, here, problem list or chief complaint, you would put in research or research encounter. And then for follow-up or wherever you see a notes section, you would enter a little note that this is the encounter for research or whatever you want to send the provider. And then CC chart, return, whatever you want to print out in the after visit summary, that's what you put here. So return whenever. You can choose number of days, weeks, months. You can enter your own here. And then they recommend that you look at the med management, etc. But the only thing that you need is really CC the chart, pen the orders, CC the chart, enter a little note, enter chief complaint, a little note that says the patient, like these are orders for this patient, etc. So send CC chart, again, here it is. I'm not going to enter any notes here for the patient. But I am going to say that I want to send this to the PCP, which in this case is not Dr. Seeger. So I'm going to search for the PI. And there he is. And then you can add a comment, please review and sign. And then, yep, enter this here. So, you say research exam. And then accept. You can add any notes that you want for them to have in their after visit summary there too. And then now you're CCing the chart to this person. And then because I said this is going to CC at closing, all you have to do is close out of this. And once you close out of the encounter, it should appear. So I'm just going to close workspace. this. And now that appears, I mean, we're not gonna be able to see it because this is not the provider's view, but that should appear for them. So it's showing on our end as the open encounter. For them, it'll show here as CC charts. And then they will be able to click on here, and then they can sign the orders immediately from here. Questions about that? Okay, so now we know how to link the patient to an encounter and how to link order that either the provider enters or you enter to the research encounter. Again, the provider can do this themselves if they are seeing the patient and they decide, they are the ones deciding what orders are to be put in for that encounter. If they do that, make sure you remind them to link that order that is just for research to that particular order in the way that I showed you. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our friend Leopold. And we want to report an AE. You're gonna click on research participant. It should bring up all the trials the patient is participating in. I'm gonna go to adverse events. There are no adverse events here that are that have occurred before. So we're gonna add one. And you can either go here and see all the options that it gives you. I'm just gonna say fever. And then you can either complete this and then send it to the PI. And what I usually do is I do that. I try to complete it and then send it to the PI. And then when you send it to them, they can change anything that you entered here, because ultimately the responsibility of grading, assessing seriousness, relatedness is their responsibility. So serious fever, let's say no, let's say is yes, clinical significant, and is it expected? Let's say yes, no, whatever. Grading, I'm not gonna go over what each of them mean, but let's say the grading is 1. And then later on, you can come back and say when that AE was resolved. Let's say it's unrelated or unlikely to be related. Again, you can add more comments regarding that. And then it'll tell you here that you're the one who completed it or the last person who updated it. And then you're gonna go here, send adverse event, and you're always gonna send it to the PI. And I'm just gonna say, please review.
There was a question in the chat,
Mhm.
asking, do we know which CTCAE version is used for this?
It's 4.3 and above. It tells you here, I think. No, it tells you, I think, in study maintenance. So let's go there. There you go. So when you go to study maintenance and you go to adverse events, you select which CTCAE version to use. And these are the options. So yes, it was 4.03 and version 5 are the ones that are used. So you'll always find that information in study maintenance, and that should already be there. Okay, so we are forwarding this adverse event. We sent it to the PI. I said, please review. I'm not gonna type that again. And then this populates in their in basket. So mark as reviewed. And then I'm gonna close out of this. We're still waiting for response on that adverse event. Once the PI signs off on it, it should appear here on their adverse events, and they should be really the last person to have reviewed that stuff. Any questions on AEs? All right, the last thing I'm gonna show you, yep.
There was a question.
Oh.
Are you able to add or remove any questions depending on what your case report form asks for? They said, we have some studies that are radiation and chemotherapy, and we need attributions to both treatments, but there was only one attribution option.
Anything that you need to add, you can add in the comments. Freestyle. Another very useful tool is you can create a smart text And I guess that's another presentation, but by creating smart texts, what you do is you create a dot phrase. So for example, if I wanted to sign my name, I go dot, me, enter, and then this is the signature that's in there for me. If you do that in Real Epic, it'll sign your name. But you can create those. You can create the attributes within here if you want to ask the provider, put them on there, and even put in like a drop-down menu for them to select yes, no, or for them to select the attributions themselves. If that's something that you're going to be doing often, I would really recommend making that smart phrase smart text. And then all you have to do is dot whatever you name that smart phrase, and it'll be on there for them to select. Okay, I'm gonna move forward on these.
Quick question, maybe a little tangential. Is Epic the best way to record all the AEs for a trial, or does Encore also do that?
We don't usually do these in Encore. The recommendation is we do this in Epic because then you can run a report.
Right.
You can say
Then you get
patients with AEs, and it'll populate all your patients who have had AEs, whether you want to do it by study or by AE or just that any AE has been reported. It'll report all of them that you've put in here. That said, some studies prefer not to do it this way. I mean, that has to be a team agreement on how things are going to be
Sure.
done.
Right.
This is very useful if you later want to run a query on that stuff.
I mean, especially for like IITs, this would be really helpful
Exactly.
because industry sponsored, they're giving you their EDC software anyways.
Correct.
You have to use that anyways.
You have to input into EDC, so then
Right.
double the work. But yeah, for IITs, then you can
IITs.
just run a report and be like, oh, these are all of them. If you're not using like breakout and stuff like that, that is. All right, I'm gonna close out the patient. And now the last thing I want to go over is how do we release these patients that are associated with our studies? How do we release them to the monitor? So the monitors, as you know, will request their access. It's view only, and you can give them access for I think a maximum of 5 days. And you could release the specific patients to them. So the way you do that is, let's say you want to run a report on patients associated with your study, or you want to run the same study that you ran before because you only want to release that one patient. I'm gonna run patients related to my study. And this is going to be for all my research studies. I'm not going to change anything, but you can change any parameters. And this is showing me a lot of patients. Patient's last name starts with a T. So you can see like this is all, I had put in insomnia patient. It would have given me just the insomnia patients, and you can adjust that in your report. But I told it, give me all the research, all the patients research study. Let's say that monitor is only here to review Leopold. So you want to select that patient, or if you run it by study, you can select all the patients. You're going to select that patient, and then you're going to select release to monitor. The research study is the insomnia study. And then I'll release it to them from today to tomorrow. And you will be the person to decide that. And this is going to be this patient group. And then we're going to go back to here. And then you can see the upcoming releases, which are here. And then it tells you how many patients or which patients you release to that monitor. And then I don't want to go over time, but I did want to go over some basics of Epic that I find really useful. So I'm going to go back to our trusty Leopold. So now we've done all the research specific things. These are not necessarily research specific, but I find these tips useful for when I'm doing screening for patients. So very important, chart review. one of the things I look at here is if I am doing, I work with GI, so I look for the latest GI note to check on, their diagnosis or when they were diagnosed or any details. If you unclick this, you'll see any upcoming appointments. Let's say I wanted to talk to that patient at their next appointment visit. Oh, it's today. I should go there to talk to this patient, see if they're willing to participate. Obviously, we'll have the providers ask them first because we're not supposed to cold approach patients. The default is that all the future visits are hidden, so make sure to unclick that. And there's also filters in all of these. You can filter by chief complaint, by department, by provider, etc. And that's something that not a lot of people use. But let's say I'm looking for a patient in cardiology. I don't care about their visits in GI. I don't care about their visits in, radiology, etc. And you can also filter by dates. This is also a utility you have available in meds. And this is useful not only for screening patients, but also for chart reviews. Let's say you want to say, I only care about medications that the patient was on starting June 1st to today. And then that'll filter it. The other thing is, again, for these, current meds only is selected. You want to unclick that if you want to look at previous ones, and then you can search by all of these parameters, filter by all of these parameters. Some of them are not all inclusive, so don't think that because a provider, let's say a provider from the GI department is given a monoclonal antibody, that is also treating their rheumatology, rheumatoid arthritis. Just because GI gave it doesn't mean that if you're looking at a room that you can't click on that. So I wouldn't do it by specialty. I would do it by either the drug name or the pharmaceutical class. That's what you're interested in. The reason why this is also useful from date to date is you want to know if in the last 6 months the patient has been on a steroid. This makes it very useful, and for many, many patients, these lists are very extensive. It helps you kind of shorten that and shorten the stuff that you need to look into. Another thing that's really useful for me is synopsis. I had a study where I had to know per day some of their basic labs and their vitals. So this particular profile, the primary care view, was really useful to me. You can filter it, the amount of years that you want. You can have all data and then scroll as far as you want. This is all the data that's available for these patients. For many patients, you will have a lot longer than this. And then you can play around, and I highly encourage you to do this and see which one of the views works best for your particular research. So for ID, for example, they'll probably include any anti-infective meds, any antibiotics, etc. if you need to know that stuff. Primary care view is kind of like a general wellness view. And then finally, I'll go into in-basket. For messages, if you're going to be sending constant messages to providers where you'll be repeating the same thing over and over, remember that you have the smart text here that you can just enter a dot, whatever, and it'll populate whatever you typed in that smart form, and it'll always bring up that same text. And if you wanted to make it even more tailored to what you're doing so that you only have to do one click, you can enter a recipient and then save that as a quick action, meaning it'll always populate the same recipient or pool and the same text. And that way, when you go to your in-basket and you say, I want to send a new quick action or to a particular physician or whatever, you'll have named that quick action when you save it, and it'll populate immediately. And then you won't have to like open new message, type the provider, type the text itself. So those are all things that make my life a little easier in dealing with all these trials. I will take any questions, and thank you for coming.
If you place an order, is there a way to rescind or take that order back before the provider signs it?
The provider himself can DC that order. You can also go back to the encounter and DC the order yourself too. Again, workflow, I guess you would ask the provider, do you want me to like DC that order or do you want to do it yourself? But really it's, you have to decide as a team what is preferred. And the way to reopen an encounter, by the way, if you needed to revisit it, is you would go to chart. You would go to the patient's chart. You would go to chart review encounters. This is our encounter that we open. You're gonna right click and then you can edit or adapt the encounter. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of the pulmonary function. And we still have CC on closing. I gotta move stuff around, so give me a second. And once I close it, it's just gonna have that one order for the provider to see. Let me refresh this. Oh, the refresh button's not here. And then the provider will only see the CBC. See, here it says pending, and then it says what we canceled. Are there questions? What I would say is the best thing to get familiar with all of these, because Epic is not very intuitive, I think, even though it's the best EHR that I've worked with. What I would say is go to the playground. I'm gonna actually type in the chat what the login is. And go to the playground, play around with test patients. And then the password straining. And then try to get comfortable with doing these things. Otherwise you forget because it's a lot of steps for everything. So practice makes perfect. There are no more questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
And I just dropped in the chat a couple of upcoming sessions this summer. And then link to our website, so you can register for those if you're not already. And thank you all for joining us today.